All right. We've got a special report this week about the Tohoku earthquake, the tsunami, and about a little town called Kamaishi and another little town next to it called Ryoishi. And this story is about those things, and it's also about politics and business and a system in post-war, P-O-S-T-W-A-R, post-war Japan, that might have to change if Japan is going to be a successful country in the future. And we'll do this story in several parts so we can cover everything. So first off, some information. As you know, on March 11th, the earthquake came and then the tsunami hit. And Kamaishi is a little town, a port, P-O-R-T, far up on the coast, northeast coast of Japan. And that town had what's called a breakwater, B-R-E-A-K-W-A-T-E-R. And this breakwater is a very big concrete wall in the water. And it's supposed to stop or break the water if a tsunami comes. And this breakwater took a long time to build. It took 30 years to build. They started to build it in 1978, and it was only finished 3 years ago. And it's 1.5 kilometers long, and it's 63 meters deep. And it was even in the Guinness Book of World Records because it's so long. And this was 1/3 of the Japanese coast has breakwaters. 33% of the Japanese coast has these breakwaters that are built all around ports and small, oceanside communities. And they've been built in the last 40, 50 years. And they were built to protect the Japanese people so they could live close to the ocean. They're designed to save people's lives and to keep business and people close to the ocean. However, on March 11th, when the tsunami came, the first wave was 9 meters high, and it destroyed the breakwater in Kamaishi and all the other breakwaters as well. And it just went right into the town. 935 people in Kamaishi died. And also in close-by town of Ryoishi, also 45 people were killed in that town, but almost all the houses in Ryoishi were destroyed. And we'll talk about Ryoishi a little bit later. So most people who look at the data, who look at the situation, will say, well, the breakwater didn't work very well. Maybe a little, but not enough. However, now they're going to rebuild it. They're going to build it again. They've decided. Who has decided? The Ministry, M-I-N-I-S-T-R-Y, Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, I-N-F-R-A-S-T-R-U-C-T-U-R-E, and Transport. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport. They're in charge of all the breakwaters in Tokyo, the big bureaucrats who decide these things. We're going to rebuild it, they said, and it's going to cost 50 billion yen. 50 billion. B-I-L-L-I-O-N. 計算してください. How much is that? And, as you figure it out. And that's part of the 9 trillion yen budget, which will probably be approved next month to rebuild in the Northeast. Trillion. T-R-I-L-L-I-O-N. So even though this breakwater didn't seem to work very well at all, we're going to rebuild it. And why is that? All right, so let's go to part 2. Okay, so here's part 2 in our special report on Kamaishi and the Great Earthquake and the breakwater. So they're going to rebuild that breakwater in this town and probably many other towns. And people say, well, we have to. Because if we don't rebuild the walls, people and businesses will be afraid and they will move away faster. So they say, even if it didn't work that well, the breakwater, still, we have no choice. Well, let's look at some other facts, though. First off, population. The area in northeast Japan, if you look at the map, even before the earthquake, this area was losing population. So, for example, Kamaishi, 40 years ago, had a population of 100,000 people. But, this year, the population is only 40,000. And all over the northeast of Japan, and probably the northwest too, unfortunately, there are just less and less people. Many, many old people. And so people have moved down to Tokyo or Osaka and other areas. So even before the tsunami, there were less and less people. So many of these towns have, only a few hundred people or even less. So many people say what we need to do is don't try to save every little fishing town or port or farming community. Instead, we need to put those little towns together away from the coast in a safe area and make little compact towns, C-O-M-P-A-C-T, compact towns, and put these, populations of people together so that, you can make a small city that could actually survive. So the big point here is we don't need to build breakwaters because in 20 or 30 years from now, maybe almost no one will be living there anyway, because the people have gotten old, they've died, and the young people, unfortunately, have moved away. So that's a big and important point. So part 3 of our special report. So to understand why the breakwater is being built, we must understand the system. The system of politics and construction and how those two are tightly tied together and have been for, since 1945 in Japan. If you go into the country in Japan, there are many big bridges, nice roads, community centers, and on the coast, many, many breakwaters, and many other construction projects that have been built. Some of these are good and necessary, but many of them aren't. Why were they built? Well, here's the system. Often what has happened is politicians, people in Tokyo, people, who are the leaders of the country, they will say, hey, let's build this bridge. Let's build this breakwater. And then in the towns, the construction companies and other people who will make money from these projects, they'll say, oh yeah, great, let's build. And we'll support you. We will vote for you. So both sides, the politicians on one side, the leaders, political leaders, and the people, the bureaucrats in the government, and on the other side, business. They help each other, and they've helped each other make all these projects, many of which were, just simply not necessary, or, as we see with the breakwaters, not really effective. But this has gone on for a while. And there's another thing called, the Japanese, you say, amakudari, which means descent from heaven. Descent, D-E-S-C-E-N-T. Amakudari, what happens there is, people who were in the government, they were bureaucrats. They were in charge of some area, let's say bridges. Well, they retire early from the government, and they join a, let's say, construction company, or they enter the world of business or semi-business that is connected to their area. And this is bad because they are not, objective. O-B-J-E-C-T-I-V-E. They use their connections from the government to basically push projects, to make projects happen. And this is not good, because this is the way that Japan has all these bridges and roads and community centers, and we've spent so much money on these things. So that's the basic system, and if that system doesn't change, then we will continue to make many, many things and construction projects. Well, we don't have the money for this anymore, but it's still happening. Okay, part 4 of our report. Let's look at what happened to the breakwater in Kamaishi. After the tsunami, the government asked for a report about the breakwaters. And, well, were they effective or not? And there was an agency, AGENCY, called the Port and Airport Research Institute, which is not in the government, but it's not exactly out of the government either. We call that semi-government. It's a SEMI, semi-government agency called the Port and Airport Research Institute. They made a report, and they said, yes, the breakwaters did help. They were helpful. Not totally, but it's better to have them. Well, the problem is, who is in that research institute? It is not independent. The people who are in that institute before, they were in the government, and they were in the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport. In other words, the people who made the report were not objective. OBJECTIVE. They were the same people who worked before on the breakwater. So, of course, they must say it's a good thing to have. If you ask other experts who are objective, who aren't in the government, who have no connection to the building breakwaters, they will tell you very clearly, the breakwater, there's a huge waste of time and money. And actually, they're bad because the waves, the tsunami waves, bounce off the breakwaters and they go to other towns. And that's where this little town Ryoishi comes in. It's a fishing village, and it's north of Kamaishi, not far. And they did a report that said the breakwater in Kamaishi will destroy Ryoishi because the waves will bounce off. They'll bounce off the wall. And that's what happened. Ryoishi was totally destroyed. And many experts think that that was because of the breakwater at Kamaishi. And yet, all these things are true. The breakwaters didn't work. They cost so much money. And it takes so long to build them. But it looks like we're still going to rebuild them. So I think the Japanese people, everybody, should really think about these things and maybe do something. Send an email or letter to your politicians. Because if we continue this system, then Japan really is not going to adapt or change to the 21st century, where we just don't have the money to pay for these things anymore.